The following is a presentation of the Women's Football Alliance.
60 teams started the trip, and for 6 of them, they have completed the mission on the road to Canton. Welcome to the Road to Canton. I'm Brian Sweeney, the host of the Women's Football Alliance Pro Division National Championship game. 3 months ago on April 22nd, these 6 teams all set out on a quest to make it to Canton, Ohio and play in the National Championship games. Let's first look at the Division III championship matchup. The Palm Beach Coyotes at 7-1 will represent the National Conference and take on the 5-2 New Mexico Banditas of the American Conference. Alex, both of these teams scored 27 points on average per game this season. This game could be an offensive shootout.
Well, and I certainly expect it to be. When we talk about starting off our championship weekend in Canton, this is a kind of game that you want to start it. Very much like OKC and Capital City a year ago in Canton, this matchup has a lot of intrigue and has a lot of questions to it as well. Both of these teams, first-year teams in the WFA, really working on improving where they are and where they stand in terms of moving up the pyramid of women's professional football. And certainly, both teams have shown that potential over the course of this season to really do a good job of managing the offense and the defense. Head to head, you don't see a lot of times these teams playing each other, one in the East, one in the West, just because regional travel makes that very difficult. And so we look at this matchup and you're looking for those comparables. You're looking for places where you can compare one team to another, and there's not that many between what West Palm Beach has done and what New Mexico has done. New Mexico has a win against a WFA Pro opponent in defeating the Mile High Blaze. The closest that West Palm Beach has had to a WFA Pro opponent is a weaker Division II opponent in a Miami Fury team that they swept both times and only gave up 2 points to the entire season, which again is more of a benefit certainly to perhaps your offense making one mistake back deep in your end zone and all of a sudden, oh, there you go, there's 2 points on the board. Let's take a look first here at West Palm Beach. It's a team that we've looked at and we've used Orlando as a measuring stick in Florida, and they were able to split with Orlando. They did not necessarily have to take on Orlando in the postseason, but it's a good learning experience from them. It's taking the advantage of having played a team that has that experience and learning from it. And certainly we've seen that with West Palm Beach and what they've been able to do this season in Division III. You look at what their offense works through. Patrice Colley at the quarterback position, only 241 yards this season. Not a lot compared to Division II and Division III, the WFA Pro, but it's still something where you look at that. You need that quarterback and that signal caller to be a significant role in leading a team's offense. And that's what Colley has done, even though it's giving up the ball sometimes to Carolyn Williams or Greenland in the backfield, to be able to carry that ball forward and keep the offense moving for West Palm Beach. The defense is something that you take a look at, and we've talked about the further on you get into the playoffs and the closer to Canton, Ohio you get, the tougher of a test it is for your defense. We'll talk about that later in Division II. We'll talk about that later in the WFA Pro, where this will be the toughest matchup of the season for both of these teams. But really for West Palm Beach, this is a time for us to find out where the Coyotes' defense is and what that defense is going to offer against a New Mexico Bonitas team that statistically there's a little bit of a gap down between New Mexico and West Palm Beach. West Palm Beach, top 3 in basically every category. New Mexico, their lowest ranking is top 9 in Division III, but then otherwise their highest ranking is top 6. And so we look at New Mexico and we say, what is the measuring stick? How can we compare New Mexico to be able to give us some sort of an idea? Well, again, let's talk about the home successes that New Mexico has had. You look at what they did against the Spice last week, and they got the results that they needed to on the offensive side of the football. You know that West Palm Beach will have a balanced attack. New Mexico does not have a balanced attack. They are very much run heavy, and we saw that this year with the WFA Pro Division and Division III, that the number 3 ranked running back in all of the WFA plays for New Mexico in Bartlett. And so the question becomes that as you look at that, if you are planning for West Palm Beach, you know you're getting the running game. You have to focus on making Bartlett throw the football to be able to make sure that your defense has a chance to impact that football game. We saw it last year with OKC and Capital City. The 7 turnovers forced by the OKC defense gave the Lady Force that championship title in Division III. I expect that again very much this time around in 2023, where if West Palm Beach or New Mexico is able to get a stop and force a turnover, that tide will be different. A lot of times, teams at this point, because of the playoff structure, because of how the playoffs work, you don't have that true adversity yet to be able to rely on it in a game against a very quality opponent. Both of these teams, again, first-year teams, but they've been phenomenal first-year teams. I don't know that I favor one team over the other in this matchup because West Palm Beach has their strengths. They have their depth, especially in the offensive side. New Mexico has their strength in the running game on that side of the football. And so I look at that and I say, okay, Canton, Ohio, big stadium, big lights. Weather will not play a factor in this game, and we'll talk about that again in Division II in the WFA Pro, because it's going to be a perfect weekend today and tomorrow in Canton, Ohio for football. That's not going to be a factor. It's just how much mistake-free football can you play, and certainly for New Mexico and for West Palm Beach, they've played mistake-free football all season long, and now we get to find out who will be taking that Division III championship home.
So last year, OKC wins the Division III National Championship. They're going to be playing now this year in the Division II National Championship. Do you think either of these teams can keep up with that kind of growth? I mean, you look at 2 years ago, Nevada Storm wins Division III. They move on to Division II. We're seeing a pattern here of success for the teams that are going from 3 to 2. Do either of these teams have that success in their pedigree?
Well, I like the foundation that's in place for both teams. I think that if we take New Mexico and we take West Palm Beach and say, if they were Division II, where would they be? Well, they both have meaningful results against Division II or higher teams. And so I think that we have that as a little bit of a measuring stick just to see where they are. I'd give a slight edge to New Mexico just because of their running game. We see that running game being so effective. And right now, New Mexico's leading rusher behind Elizabeth Jones of OKC at Division II is just 100 yards behind. And so I look at that and say, okay, well, maybe there's a chance there certainly for our New Mexico Bonitas, if they get the bump next year, to be in the playoff mix in Division II. West Palm Beach, again, I think because, as we see in the Florida and Alabama and Atlanta-based teams, because of those regional focuses, we don't get to see how they fare against some of the blue bloods of the WFA. Maybe they play Orlando, that's great, but go play Atlanta, go play Carolina Phoenix, go play these teams up in the higher levels that have been around for a while and tell us where you're at then.
Great, thank you. Next up is the Division II National Championship. After failing to make the playoffs last season, the New York Wolves of the National Conference are a perfect 8-0, including an exciting come-from-behind victory in the conference championship game. They will face off against another perfect team, the OKC Lady Force. Alex, OKC is looking to become the second team to win back-to-back national championships while also moving up a level in the WFA division structure. Your thoughts on this game?
Well, OKC, Brian, and we've talked about the Lady Force all season long. OKC has been a team that we have tabbed not just on where they rank in the Massies, but in their physical ability as a team that certainly figures to be already, we talked about in week one, they were WFA Pro bound in week one. And you certainly could see that in terms of how they played. Decisive effort against Sun City in the opening round, and then again against Nebraska in the championship round. OKC is as elite of a team in Division III and in Division II. It's certainly something where, regardless of what happens in this game here against New York, the Lady Force, to me, have to be at WFA Pro next year, because the gap between them and everybody else in that conference in the Division II side, there's just not enough. You throw them in this season into WFA Pro, and realistically, you could really make the argument about them slipping into that last playoff spot rather than the Cali War. But again, we don't know that because, we don't get to see the actual action on the field. It starts with Elizabeth Jones. We've seen Elizabeth Jones in Division III and in last season for the OKC Lady Force lead that offense phenomenally on the ground. The only Division III rusher a season ago with over 1,000 yards, the only Division II rusher with over 1,000 yards this season, and the only one that would be at the WFA Pro level. No one at WFA Pro had 1,000 yards. Elizabeth Jones did. But unlike with the other game that we talked about before, you can't focus on the running game because Desiree Jeffries does a great job passing the ball when she needs to. She does a great job receiving it. And the big focal point of OKC is their defense as well as their offense, simply because they lead it in scoring. They lead the league in defense. They lead the league in offensive yards per game. They lead the league in rushing yards per game. The only thing they don't lead the league in is passing yards per game, and that belongs to the New York Wolves. They got a pretty big scare their last time out against the Baltimore Nighthawks. I remember turning that game on, watching it, and seeing what on earth happened to New York at home, being so far behind to the Baltimore Nighthawks. But then Mulligan, their quarterback, led arguably the best comeback that I have seen in the WFA in a long, long time. Because when you're down 19-0 and you have the ability to lead your team back and come away with those points in the fourth quarter the way that Mulligan and the offense for New York did, give the Wolves a ton of credit. It's a team that we've talked about. We talked about last week and the week before that. It's a team in the New York Wolves that has a gigantic chip on their shoulder. They missed the playoffs last season, and now they're going for it here. They're going to have a chance against OKC. But you look at those little defining characteristics. New York cannot play as poorly in the first three quarters as they did against Baltimore. Bad throws, bad reads, bad protection, and then mistakes made on the football field. One of the big things that I remember late in the game between New York and Baltimore, the play-by-play announcer Patrick Brown, he went, "Oh man, oh man, oh man," because of a mistake that New York had made. And for the Wolves, they cannot have an oh man moment because OKC is the team, and we talked about them in Division III, is a team that is going to take advantage of miscues. 7 turnovers forced against Capital City in the Division III championship in 2022. If they get 1 or 2 against New York Wolves, it might be over. We know that they can come back. We know that they have the ability to come back, but OKC is a different team. They have more talent than Baltimore. They have more talent than Atlanta. They have more talent than anybody the New York Wolves have played this season or last. And so the question becomes this: does New York have enough in the tank to play not 15 minutes, but a full 60 minutes of football to be able to contend with the OKC Lady Force? I like OKC in this contest, but again, New York, if they play that full 60-minute style of football, they have every ability to win this game and win a championship and show the league and show the WFA, you said we couldn't, and here we are.
You brought it up a little bit already. You look at the last few Division II national champions. The Nevada Storm move up to the Pro Division. Somewhat decent success their first year at the Pro. Second year, really not a lot going for them. Look at Mile High Blaze. Move up to the Pro Division, not a lot of success. You've already said you think OKC could have possibly taken that final playoff spot this year over the Cali War. Does OKC, though, have what it takes to prolong their Pro Division if they should reach it?
I think that compared to the other two teams that you mentioned making the jump from Division II, let's first take a look at Mile High. Mile High should not have been Division II champions, but they were. And of course, because like I talked about last week, wins matter on the football field, they beat Derby City. But remember, that championship game in Division II a year ago, Derby City had arguably some of the worst clock management, especially in the fourth quarter, that I've ever seen. And it cost them a championship that the Derby City Dynamite realistically should have had. But as we know, close only counts, horseshoes, hand grenades. And so you look at what Mile High had. I didn't have high expectations for Mile High coming into the season, and certainly with a lost Division III team, they proved why. You look at the Nevada Storm. In their first season at WFA Pro, they had all the talent in the world. Jesse Felker became MVP last year. Jasmine Plummer as well, and Mo Etchen, it remains one of the great forces for the Nevada Storm at quarterback, but they just lost too much in the offseason this year, and we saw it I mean, early on, they just didn't have enough to contend this year, and they're going to rebuild in the offseason and hope to contend again in 2024. But I think OKC just has a little bit more of that depth and that consistency where, again, you take OKC and you put them into the pro level next year, they're going to be contending for that 4 or that 3 just because of how filled with parity the American Conference is in the WFA Pro.
Thank you. And we'll be right back.
The Women's Football Alliance wants to thank their sponsors. Thank you for your support of the Women's Football Alliance.
Welcome back. Every once in a while, we all need a little pick-me-up, maybe a little encouragement. This week, Lois has what we need in her segment, Low on the Go.
Well, here we are. We have gotten down to the championship. This is it. And as you know, football is really just as much mental as it is physical. In fact, it's more mental than physical. So here is a round of pep talks for our teams.
Never back down, never give up. Amazing.
Leave everything on the field. Never take no for an answer.
Right.
Always say yes. Learn to say maybe. Keep your head in the game. This is your time. Take it.
Don't screw it up. Play every game like it's your last. Never give up.
Team, don't forget.
Never back down, never what?
Never give up.
Never back down, never what?
Never give up.
Amazing.
Yeah. And now a special message from our very own Megan Patterson.
Hey everybody, I'm Megan Patterson. This will be my second year going to Canton, Ohio to battle for the national championship. Just want to let you know that remember everything you do, make sure you do it with hard work, dedication, passion, love of the game. And just remember that in the end, we're all sisters, we're all out here because we love this game. And no matter what happens, good luck to everybody that's going to Canton, Ohio, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.
Recently, I had the chance to sit down and talk with the 2 head coaches of the Pro Division National Championship game. We talked about their seasons, a little bit about history, and more importantly, about the future of women's football. Here they are. I'm joined today by head coach of the Boston Renegades, John Johnson. John, once again, you're making it to the championship. How does that feel for you?
I mean, I'm a bit numb to it. Right now I'm just dialed into all the details of preparing the team to achieve its goal, which is to win the national championship game, not just show up. So, I mean, it's great. Obviously, it's a great feeling to win, but we still have a lot of business, and we have a huge test coming up here.
Yeah, I mean, you've got this would be your 5th national championship in a row. And for St. Louis, should they pull off a victory, it would be their 5th overall championship. I mean, you both have something to fight for. Do you think your team has it in them to get that 5th in a row?
They're a great team, and when you watch them on film, there's a lot of quality. We played them last year, and I remember back in 19 in Colorado when they played Detroit. And watching that game, I was really thoroughly impressed with Coach and how he organized his team and how he had them ready to play. And nothing's changed. Here it is, how many years later, and, they're right in it. Last year, I was really surprised they didn't make the playoffs. To me, I thought they were one of the teams that we would probably see at the end between, Minnesota and them. So I was surprised by that. But, it is what it is, and we're playing them, and, we're going to have a fight of our lives coming up here.
Over the last few seasons, everything the WFA Pro level has shown that the American Conference was really developing that parity. This year, we finally started to see the National Conference getting that parity as well. I mean, with the addition of Alabama doing spectacular this year, DC Divas, Pittsburgh Passion, there's a lot more parity now on the national side as well. Overall, how do you feel the Pro Division is going to grow going into the next couple of years?
Well, I'm seeing a lot of growth. Like you said, the Alabamas of the world are coming in and competing at a high level. Pittsburgh is Pittsburgh, right? And DC is always DC, and they did a great job this year really having a new staff coming in and molding molding their systems and coming in, and really that team really grew. By the end of the season, they were playing at their best ball. So I see them being nothing but contenders next season. The same with Pittsburgh. So, it'll be great to see Detroit take a step up, and and Tampa Bay as well. I mean, Tampa Bay's got a good roster. They were just hurting at the quarterback position. So I would imagine that's going to improve with the more experience that the quarterback has. So all in all, I see the league really growing, and it's really going in the right direction.
But one final question for you, Coach Johnson. You look at the Division II game. You got the Wolves and the OKC Lady Force facing off. Do you have a preference over which of those makes it to the Pro Division next year, or do you think there's room for both teams?
I am always an inclusive person. I like to say bring them all in. The Wolves are definitely a team that, in my mind, they're a pro team. They've always been a pro team. They're a long-standing team, much like Minnesota, much like DC, right? They've been here since the beginning. So, I'd love to see them up there. They got great coaching. They got a great structure in the front office, and they got great players, obviously, because they're in the championship game here. So we'd love to see them there, and also OKC. They're coming from a smaller market, but they really have a strong fan base behind them, and it's really, really awesome to see that.
Well, Coach, it's always a pleasure talking with you. I look forward to seeing you in Canton, Ohio in person.
I appreciate it, Brian, and thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure being on this award-winning, Emmy-winning show that you got.
Well, not quite Emmy yet, but we'll see what we can do. Thanks, Coach.
We're pushing for greatness. We're pushing for greatness.
All right, I'm joined now by the head coach of the St. Louis Slam, Quincy Q, as you like to go by. Appreciate you taking a little bit of time today. Congratulations on completing the road to Canton. You're playing in the championship. How's that feel for you and the organization?
Thanks. It feels good. We've been trying to get back there, I should say, for a few years. And we had some things fall into our place this year. Had the right number of veterans returning, people working hard in the off season, played well during the season, well enough to get us here. So, feeling happy about it all paying off. Some of the hard work that the team and the coaches have put into it, and got one more game to play. So we'll see how the season ends.
I mean, playing well is an understatement. I mean, your defense did not allow a point until the first round of the playoffs. I mean, what was up with that this season?
I'll give it as a testament to the players. We did our jobs as coaches, scheme wise, and just trying to help them understand what we thought the other team might be trying to do. But ultimately, it was those players that kind of bought into the system, that did their work, kind of took pride in maintaining the goose egg, after we had it for a couple of games. And they just kind of took it and ran with it. It wasn't ever actually a goal of mine per se, but they found some pride in it just as the games got going, and that we were able to hold a couple of opponents scoreless. It was more of a, let's make sure we're staying on top of our assignments, make sure we're communicating, make sure we're doing what we're supposed to do. If we give up a point, so be it, but let's not make sure we're just donating, points just from bad alignment, bad assignment, that kind of stuff. So, on one hand, it was good to see for the first couple of games, but as we got it, I think that kind of sharpened their focus, just to make sure that, hey, like, we are really good, as a defensive unit, like, let's keep it going. Let's not let down now just because, we're getting closer to the playoffs. Let's keep our foot on the gas. So it was good to see, and my background is as a defensive coach. So there was some pride in that. So it was good to see the players rallying to it and kind of taking pride and ownership in it.
Yeah, so you guys are going for your 5th national title. That's got to be good. You'll have one for every finger, including the thumb on that hand there. And Boston on the other side of the ball is going for their 5th in a row. Everybody's talking that if anybody could beat Boston this season, it's the St. Louis Slam. Are you guys ready for that hype that everyone's building you up for?
I think definitely our veterans are. We know Boston just as an organization. They are they're the goal, right? They're the perennial powerhouses. They always have a good team. They're always winning games. They've been the number one seed for however many years. So they're an organization that kind of runs their stuff, and it's something to obtain, something to shoot for. And I think just we try to keep it, for what it is. Obviously, biggest game on the biggest stage, against the number one seed. But at the end of the day, it's still a game. It's still a football game. I tell my players every year, there's only one team whose season ends the way they want it to. And for us, we've at least given ourselves a chance. We're in the game. We'll go out there, we'll play, we'll do what we do. We're trying to avoid a lot of that hype. Because at the end of the day, while we have the utmost respect for Boston, we at the end of 4 quarters, like, somebody's going to be up, somebody's going to be down. That's going to be the end of it. Both teams will shake hands and congratulate each other on the end of the season. But yeah, we're trying to keep the hype out of it, at least for us. We know they're a great team. We're going in with that expectation. We're going in with that expectation that they're the number one seed. A lot of people may attribute us or make us the underdogs for that. I don't pay a lot of attention to ratings and stats, and my players actually think it's funny. I don't pay a lot of attention to stats and all that kind of stuff. We look at the opponent themselves, and we kind of do our job, and we focus on what we do, where we match up, what do we need to focus on, give ourselves the best chance to win, and see where the chips land.
Well, hey, congratulations on making it to the national championship game. Good luck to you and the entire St. Louis Slam organization, and I'll talk to you in Canton.
Cool. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Take care.
And we'll be right back.
The Women's Football Alliance wants to thank their sponsors. Thank you for your support of the Women's Football Alliance.
Welcome back. Now let's take a look at the WFA Pro Division National Championship matchup. The St. Louis Slam and the Boston Renegades are two teams that are synonymous with championships. Both of these teams are undefeated this season and looking to win another ring. Alex, you've been saying all season long that this was going to be the matchup to watch this year. Do you think the St. Louis Slam have what it takes to give Boston their first loss in 5 seasons?
Well, let's go back and look at recent history. We talk about, in terms of the WFA Pro Division and the top tier championship game, Minnesota went into the games against Boston in 22 and 21 with the idea that they were going to be close. Remember, 2021, it's a very close game at the half until an untimely turnover. Boston takes it down the field, and it's all over at that point. Minnesota, again in 2022, got off to a slow start. Boston was able to carry the day, no problem, no way, no how. But in that 2022 season, Brian, the Boston Renegades traveled to St. Louis, Missouri to take on the St. Louis Slam. And for the first time in years, mind you, the St. Louis Slam led the Boston Renegades, meaning that at the halftime break, Boston was in an unfamiliar position. They were behind at the half. Now, of course, Boston took over in the second half and did what they do to everybody. But I think if we look at this matchup, and of course, Kirk Herbstreit, one of the great ESPN broadcasters on their college football program, since we're going to be on ESPN calling the game, I'm not going to make a prediction one way or the other. But let's take a look at it position by position. Both of these teams have been very good. Boston, the number 1 offense in the WFA Pro. St. Louis, the number 1 defense in the WFA Pro. Boston puts up points in spades. We have seen that their entire playoff run. The defense for the St. Louis Slam did not allow a point in the regular season. We sit here now in that championship week. Still, it's amazing that they didn't give up a single point in the regular season. Somebody might come in and say, well, they gave up 6 to Derby City. No, they didn't. That was a pick 6, right? I mean, come on now. Derby City and that game against St. Louis, you started to see some of where St. Louis was going and starting to figure out their offense. They really surged offensively into the playoff. But if I look at these two teams, and let's go position by position. Let's start at quarterback. Allison Cahill, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time in any sport of football at any level. You look at Jamie Gall, if she were in a East Coast metropolitan area and playing for an East Coast team, she might be in that conversation too. Since I've been covering the WFA since 2019, Jamie Gall has been either the leading passer or one of the leading passers across the WFA for as long as I've been covering this league. She does not get as much credit, and it does not get as much conversation about her as what she should be. I don't give an edge one way or the other. Cahill has a tenure and the experience, so does Jamie Gall. These are two evenly matched quarterbacks who have both been on the big stage, won championships, and don't have a real advantage over one another. Where we look down here, let's look at the running back positions. For Boston, it's the three-headed monster we've talked about all year. Ruth Mata, Katie Falkowski, and Tuti Kuusinen. Just because you just hand the ball off and there they go. It's amazing. You watch that game against Alabama, and the Alabama Fire, we asked, where are the Fire truly? And we found out the Fire were not quite ready to contend with the Boston Renegades because of, again, that running game certainly between what Boston has. They ran all over Alabama. They're going to have a tougher time against the St. Louis defense, but they just ran out of time, and Boston just does so well on the offensive side of the ball, and they rack up the yardage as well. Some would say, well, it's garbage time because they blow everybody out. Yeah, but yards are still yards. I mean, that's just how you have to look at it, right? Boston plays well against teams, and they run the football really, really well. It's a balanced offense between Cahill and the three running backs in their backfield. Compare that to St. Louis. Jada Humphrey has been a star as a rookie for the St. Louis Slam. And friend of the program, Taylor Hay, is certainly somebody who is going to figure into that system that they have where they switch off pretty much evenly between the two, Humphrey and Hay. I like Humphrey better, a little bit faster, a little bit more elusive. Hay used to be that, not as much anymore because she's been playing a long time, but Jada Humphrey has the ability to break off the big play, and certainly when we saw Minnesota and St. Louis play each other this year, we saw that a number of times where she has that ability. So really, is it 3 versus 2? I mean, you could do a coin flip, but you have to go really for Boston having the strength on the running ground game. Look at their receivers. Take a look for Boston. Shante Bonds, who was a championship-winning quarterback for Boston a year ago, is their leading receiver now with 500 receiving yards this season. It allows them to do so much more because, again, when you look at what Bonds has done this season, having that role on the receiving side of it, it opens up space for Adrian Smith, who, remember, in 2022, that national championship game against Minnesota, she was going to play a big factor. She didn't have a catch. It didn't matter. And so when you look at what they can do for the Boston Renegades, they can pass it because they have a strong number 1 in Bonds, and then you have a strong tenured wide receiver in Smith as your number 2, where there's some really good options for Boston in the passing game. Compare that again to what St. Louis has, where Kerry McMahon has been another great rookie for the St. Louis Slam. One thing you've seen out of St. Louis, they've had a ton of rookies step up this year, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And McMahon is certainly someone who has done that. Big touchdowns against Minnesota, big touchdown against Cali. This is a team that has thrived because of their rookies on the offensive side of the ball this season. And certainly McMahon gives them that ability as well. Beyond that, Jamie Skinner, another longtime member of the St. Louis Slam, has done a great job receiving this year, as well as playing the secondary side of the football as well. And then Kaylee Knightsling, who does such a great job on those returns. She's so fast, can read a gap easily on the kick return game. It's, again, one of those conversations where you don't truly know whose receivers are better, Boston's or St. Louis. Yards will tell you one thing. We'll find out coming up on ESPN who's truly better. Defense is where this game's going to be won. Whether it be Boston's strong, stout defense that we always see from them in these championship games that continues to thrive and feast against teams. We saw it in Minnesota against Minnesota in 2022 where they just suffocated the Minnesota offense. They did so in the championship game against Alabama Fire. And certainly this will be the toughest test for the Boston Renegade defense this season because really they haven't played a team that is as lethal on offense as is the St. Louis Slam. And the Slam offense, as we've seen, they didn't score over 30 points until their last game against Derby City, but then they really started to cruise once they got into the playoffs as well. 45 points, I think, off the top of my head against Cali, and then another 38, I think, point output against Minnesota. It's a team that's offense has gotten better over time. St. Louis Slam in their defense, they're led by Jasmine Yandel, who is, for my money, one of the best linebackers currently playing in the WFA today. She, again, like some of the other names that we've talked about in the past for Boston, if Yandel is in a different market, she gets a lot more attention because she led her team in tackles. She was near the top 5 in tackles throughout the entirety of the season for the St. Louis Slam, and she will be a game breaker. We talked about those running backs, Mata, Falkowski, and Kuusinen. Yandel knows how to play a running back. We saw that against Minnesota in 2022 reading Grace Cooper and stopping what Grace Cooper was able to do. We saw that this year as well against Sarah Roche, who, again, a great rookie for Minnesota, but could not do much when running against Yandel. You want that strong running back to be able to do something, and when you're running against Jasmine Yandel, it's very difficult to do that in between the tackles. Boston, from what I can tell, watching their game against Alabama, watching their game against DC, they do a lot of running in between the tackles. And so it's going to be a challenge for Jasmine Yandel to get comfortable early, but beyond that, what surrounds her is a great secondary and a fantastic defensive line that creates pressure on a quarterback. This, again, if you talk about this being the toughest offense that Boston has faced, this will be the toughest defense that Boston has faced as well in the St. Louis Slam. It's one that has complexity in its defensive structure. It's one that's very difficult for a quarterback to read, and more importantly, it gets stops when it needs to. Boston hasn't faced a team like that in, you could argue, years. I mean, really, this is a team that they can get the stops and they know how to get the ball back in their offensive hands, where Boston hasn't had to deal with that adversity since their game in St. Louis in 2022. This game is a toss-up. It really is. It could go either way, and that great question that we've been asked all year long, who's going to come close to Boston? The answer to that question should be St. Louis this week in Canton, Ohio. But the answer to the question, will they have enough to beat Boston? Well, I mean, that's a question that everyone's been asking all season long, and we'll find out on Saturday in terms of, does the St. Louis Slam have enough perfect football behind them and in their game plan for Saturday to be able to knock off the Boston Renegades and finally finish off the drive for 5 that they've had for so long?
So one thing, when I was looking at everything, getting prepped for this series, the biggest thing I noticed is roster size difference. You print St. Louis's roster, you fill one sheet of paper. You print the Boston Renegades roster, you're on 2 sheets. Will that come into play in Canton, Ohio?
Well, I think the answer to that question is no. I don't think that the depth of the roster is certainly something that you look at, but as far as what I know and as far as what we know, there's no major injuries on either side. It's not like in 2022, we're going into that contest, you knew Allison Cahill more likely than not was going to be out due to injury. The Houston Energy, when in our broadcast, in Minnesota's broadcast against Houston, one of the big talking points that we had was there was maybe 25 players on the field for the Houston Energy. And it doesn't matter how many players you have as long as they're the right players. You talk about of course, my main sport is hockey. When I play hockey, if we're like 7 people on the bench total, it doesn't matter who those 7 are as long as you have the right 7. Football's a different sport, of course, obviously. But again, it does not matter the depth that you have as long as the strength that you have. Watch again the temperature on the turf. We've mentioned that it's going to be a relatively cool, comfortable day in Canton, Ohio here on Saturday. But watch that turf temperature. We were down there last year. It's balmy, it's blazing. Whichever team is on the near side, you know, when the sun starts to set, you might have an advantage of being in the shade, but the Renegades have been on that far side as long as they've been playing in Canton, Ohio. That gets hot. And realistically speaking, you look at this game and say, who has the strength and the conditioning and, of course, the Aid Nation supplies to be able to withstand the heat on the turf? That's going to play a big factor as well.
Thank you. So we have reached the end of the road. Alex and I both look forward to meeting many of you in Canton, Ohio. If you see us walking around the stadium or at the hotel, please stop and say hello. Next season, if you have ideas, or if you're looking to sponsor the Road to Canton, send us an email at roadtocantonshow@gmail.com. For Lois Cook and Alex Wested, I'm Brian Sweeney, and we'll see you next season on the Road to Canton.
Thank you for watching the preceding presentation from the Women's Football Alliance.